Hello and welcome to our latest webinar. As always, we have our live session now, but we do have a lot of people that tend to register and watch this at a later date. So good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are and whenever you are watching this. My name is David Mitchell. I'm a former head teacher of a couple of schools in the northwest of England, now working with Nautilus. Still a school improvement partner, and enjoying that as well. And I'm joined by my colleague David. David, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, David. And yeah, good to I'm looking forward to this one today, to be honest. It's the first time I've done it, but yes, I'm David Rushby, so I'm a former head teacher as well, 12 years as a head teacher, 2 schools. I also still work for the local authority. 30 years in education altogether. So I think I've done a fairly good shift so far, and co-creator of Nautilus. So today, hopefully, well placed to take us on a wander through the platform, have a look at some really good solutions.
What happened there, basically, in terms of headship, developing your leadership to Nautilus, and what we're doing now?
Yeah, thanks, David. I think it's a really interesting to listen to you then, because I remember all those groups. Hubs, I've been part of hubs, localities. Is that even a word? I'm not sure. I think it is. Or it was.
Yeah,
they all sounding sort of very pyramids, networks, all sound very dynamic. Most of those things, from my experience, consisted on meeting in either small rooms or big rooms, sort of soaking up agendas and listening to kind of discussions really or presentations around key areas for improvement or offers. But sometimes it could digress. I had a really good network, small sort of geographical network of schools that I worked with. I suppose it was what was the pyramid before it was redesigned 2 or 3 times. All really good head teachers, all running very good schools, all that had come from special measures actually, pretty much, and we're dealing with the very same kind of contextual challenges. We were close, we met regularly. We talked about anything from the tennis coaches that we were using to the swimming baths, to sharing attendance policies. You get the idea. And quite often I would sit in these meetings and think, I'm looking around the table, we've got 8 head teachers here. We've got infant heads, junior heads, lots of expertise, and we're not really kind of influencing what happens in our schools. I just felt like if anybody was asking, right, okay, great, you've got this group of people, what do you do? It's a question of impact, isn't it? And as you broaden that and then start to think, well, actually, I'm there, but I'm representing my school. And within my school, I've got then a deputy head, a Senko, an early years leader, and now all of this distributed leadership. You start to then think, well, it's exactly the same principle. Now, people will create some kind of networks, but who takes the agenda? What happens there, and how do we direct that so we can focus on school improvement? And that's really, I think, where things are quite often break down. Very little time spent collaborating and focusing, whether or not it's the head or the leaders throughout the school, on genuine school improvement, getting into the classrooms. And I think as well, we've got to change the dynamics. There's a few things we'll look at today. But really, if, as soon as we started to think about using an iPad, so when I created the original sort of prototype and created a framework to go around the classrooms in my school, I then invited in my colleagues, and normally it would be the usual meeting, 3 hours in the school, and we were hosting. For one of those hours, I gave them all an iPad, and there were 7 or 8, and then just said, right, off you go, and go visit 2 or 3 teachers. And at the end of that hour or that morning, I could then download a report that had all of these contributions from the head teachers, had some feedback for the colleagues, had some data, so we got some analysis from that. And basically this real document, which I found hugely reassuring as a head to have, because it had that external validation and it was very credible. So that makes you think, right, okay, that process in itself is great. That's really sound. And we're now starting to get the dividends from those relationships. So how can we then, as leaders, prepare and create sort of other avenues and other approaches for the rest of your team. So that's kind of how it was developed in the first instance, David. And
yeah, well, I'll just add to that really, that I think even when we're talking about leadership, even at classroom level, we've got hundreds of thousands of teachers around this country, all striving for the same thing.
Yeah.
But quite a lot of people, I would say a high percentage of those working in total isolation, and the same there for school leaders.
I think that's really interesting. Absolutely. Sorry.
Yeah, and I just think, they're working in isolation. They're still working in isolation.
Yeah.
And that is a very lonely place, number one. Number two, the threats are high because you just don't know where to gauge what's going on around you, to take that advice. And so we've got to, as a profession, surely, we've got to be working together a lot more than we have been.
I mean, the minute I started working for the local authority and I really got stuck in and dug deep in other schools, I realised that we're tackling a lot of things, but there's a massive difference from one school to another. And that, the assumption could be, particularly if you're in a school for a long time, that everybody does things the same way as you. And it's really not the case. And there's always things to learn as well from going into other schools and being able to kind of get out of school. So I think it can be, as you say, I think it can be a dangerous situation if we don't. Just sticking this kind of model on the screen. I'm not going to PowerPoint today. We're going to move across to Nautilus and take a look at how we can use iPads today and how we can use the platform to solve some of those problems and to really get some dividends. So that's the idea in a moment. But really just starting with that idea that at the minute, the network that we have, how do we utilize that network? So we're having internally that network of leaders, but externally we've got that wider network of leaders that we may not currently be fully utilizing, and all of that expertise. And for each of those little white dots that we're looking at there, each Senko, we've got access to another 2, 3, 4, 6, 10 Senkos, however big that group can be. The same for English leads, the same for early years. How can we work with our colleagues externally to be able to kind of set up those arrangements? And if we are in a federation or a MAT or all of those things, then we have access to those things. But how effectively do we do that? And I also work with schools who have that as well, and then question sometimes looking at it, how that time is spent. I've seen people who have responsibilities for teaching and learning covering head teachers so that they can go do something else. And that's sort of, again, you just think, right, okay, we can do, we can be more creative than that. So the minute we utilize that relationship, just on the screen there, we get collaborative school leadership. So we've got that school leadership, great. Collaborative school leadership, that wider collaboration, it's massive. It has so much potential, and yet so much of it just depends on your systems, your processes, your approaches in school to how you do things. So that's really what we're going to focus on today, and I'm going to stick it on the screen in a minute. I'm going to sort of just leave you with that image, because I think that that's something to work towards. I honestly think that if I was talking about the before and after, those two slides sort of represent really that situation that I've just talked about with my group of head teachers. So what I'll do here really, I mean, what you can see in the users area here at the top, just to sort of show you the navigation really, up at the top, we've got our activities, administration, those kind of things, the learning walks, book studies. We could do it obviously for any aspect and subject across school. And typically we would be looking more often than not at how to use the system. So we're not only thinking now today about how to use the platform, we're actually thinking about how we can get those other dividends. And today's session really is all about that. We're then going to have a little think about the insights, the reports, the impact, and also the gallery, and take a little look at how we can use photos as well, and work with that wider team in that respect. Before looking at the builder, which is a place where we can talk a little bit about creating our own content, and just making sure that if we've decided that we wanted to make something new, can we share it? How can we collaborate? And so that gives us carte blanche to be able to do that. The other thing quickly that I will mention, just for my settings today, so we've got a rubric in the background we're going to use. which is going to help us to structure things, which is particularly good in this instance because when we're inviting people into school, we want a common language, we want clarity, we want to look at the same key things. So this just guides us. That's what the rubric's going to do rather than dictate. I would also throw in at the beginning, as I always do, that we're looking at the effectiveness of teaching and learning. So everything's been kind of presented in that way. And so rather than judging the teachers, so there's a distinction to make there. Internally at my school, I've changed the terms again, as I always do, to prioritize, develop effective and highly effective, so we can get some good feedback. So there's good prompts there for my colleagues as well as the colour schemes. The default ones, which are the Ofsted ones, we can revert it back, which is helpful and does serve a very good purpose when we want to create reports for inspectors, governors, where we want that Ofsted speak and we want to be credible and consistent. So we will come back to that, but you'll see those applied across the whole platform. So we're all going to be using that. So we're creating a common language for those people who are coming into our school to work with us. So here you can see I'm really in the users area, adding all of my team. I'm adding my internal and external leaders. So you'll see here from my wider team, all of the people that have subject and aspect responsibilities in school have all been divvied out, whether or not it's early years, SEND or subjects, multiple if needs be, so they've got what they need. And then down here, you can see my external partners. So you can see here, I've added to the system now, not just my leaders in school, but those external leaders out of school. So that's the first really a real opportunity in kind of taking the platform and thinking, okay, here's my group of staff, but I've also got access to all of these people too. So if I add them to my system, I've got this real wide network. Okay, so if I add Lucas now, and he's coming into my school, and LR at. As I add them to the system, I'm then going to decide what they are. So I'm going to add their role. So you'll see on my team, I've got 5 head teachers, I think, added. So let's add this person as a, let's add them as a Senko. So Lucas is coming in as a Senko. He's external. So I check that box to say that he's external. And really what I'm doing there is I'm just making sure he gets to see what he needs to see. Now, Lucas only needs to be a user on my system because he only needs to participate. So he's going to show up, do a learning walk with my Senko. They're going to work together, but he doesn't need to see any of the background data. He just needs to be involved in the process. So I'm going to add Lucas as a user. So just to recap on what the other ones are doing, I can add leadership users. Those are my internal ones, and I can assign them responsibilities so that they can get a dashboard which is subject specific. And also I'm a priority user, so I can see everything. So it could be me, the deputy, but also talking about that collaboration, it could also be an executive head teacher, or it could be my school improvement partner from the local authority. And then they can see in advance, they can come into the system, and they can also see what we're doing together in school. But I'm going to add Lucas as an external partner. As I add Lucas there, he'll now join my team. He'll get an invitation to log in. And that means basically when he turns up, we can start working together. So we get the idea. And again, like I say, you can see all of my external leaders and my head teachers. So we're building that team internally, externally. I would also really over time be adding the English leads from other schools, the schools down the road or our partner schools. I would be adding the early years leads, the SEND leads. So we've got multiple leads working together inside my school, albeit led by my internal leader. So you get the idea as to how we can populate that and build that team. Does that make sense so far, David? I know you want me to take a look and create a little bit of something for you just to look closer at the process.
Yes, that's great. Now, what I'll do is I've got some what I would class as fairly realistic but hypothetical situations that I'll present to you. That hopefully with people that are watching will ring some bells, and then you can kind of show what we could do with the platform to support that, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so I'm going to go with something. Well, it should be fairly simple. Maybe at the beginning, I've got I've decided I'm going to try and be a lot more collaborative as a head teacher, and I'm going to invite a number of head teachers in. Let's say 4 head teachers in.
Yeah.
For an afternoon, and part of that afternoon, or for a morning, part of that session, just for an hour, I want us to go and do just a walk out around school. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And for this one, because it's the first one, I don't want it to be a specific focus. I'm going to use some of the expertise, because I know the head teachers. For example, one of them is in early years. It's got a really great early years background, because they were, used to be an inspector in early years.
Yeah.
Someone else has, was a writing moderator for the local authority. So I'm going to, I'll ask them to go that way, and I'll ask them to go that way. But how could this be used then to support that journey?
Yeah, okay. So what we'll do is we will set up the learning walk. So a little bit like what I was sort of describing, really, I guess. So when I click across to create here, it's the same process as if I was creating it for one person as it would be for 4 people. So I'm going to click create there. I'm going to give it quite a specific sort of name, I suppose. So this is whole school learning walk. And I'm going to call it 2, because I've already got a number 1 on there, because I'm going to show you a report shortly that will cover that. So in here, I'm going to decide which framework to use. I'm going to use the learning snapshot, which is the one we always tend to take a quick look at. But again, I think making the point that we're looking at guidance, and we'll look at 1 or 2 others shortly. And also in here, I'm going to make it sort of non-specific. So any subject, all, it doesn't really matter about the subject here. So that means we can filter on the dashboard, but we don't have to look at key subjects. You didn't want an observation, a tag there, because we could, if we wanted to, and I know there's 4 here, but there was 2 of us, we could be looking at writing, or we could be looking at behavior, or we could be looking at some key specific things. But this is generally teaching and learning. So 4 people coming into my school, a bit like I said, they've come in for a meeting, they're getting out into the classrooms and they're visiting. So I'm going to set that one up. We could choose to use those statements that I showed you at the start or not. I'll show you what they look like with, because they will guide, and also I've reframed them so they do look very different. So here's my learning snapshot. I'm going to click on there, and now I'm going to add who's going to do it. So I've already added these people, as I showed you, to my users. So they're already on my team as far as kind of populating that one. So there's going to be this person, that's a head from the school down the road. That's me, who's obviously a head. I'm going to pop down here. I know that Phileas is also a head, and Jean is also a head. So there's 4 of us there, 4 head teachers. They're the ones that are coming in to see me. And we're going to go see everybody, except I will just untoggle that one. And also, we're not going to be observing me. So that means that I've toggled all the staff in school. And as I add that, it will save that here automatically. It's populated and ready with all my classroom visits. So you can see all of the possible visits. Now, one thing that we're going to say here, as we move across from this page, which is save things automatically into the walks, is I'm just going to say, David, really how this will work. So as we then get 8, as we get the four iPads or tablets ready before they arrive, because I'll show you a very quick and clever way of being able to kind of log them into the system. So what we can do is we can actually get 4 iPads and then assign them to those people as they turn up. So I'll come back to that in a moment. But what we're going to do here, you can see I've logged in to my account, and my 3 colleagues are doing the same thing. And you will see then our to-do column, all the possible classroom visits. And these are possible classroom visits, because I'm not going to go see all of those people in an hour. We want to drop in. We want to make it informal. I would be talking to my staff about the fact that this is a really sound exercise, and also that you can have a go at this at some point soon. So we'll get it in the diary, because we want to look at maths key stage 2. So we want to bring in those leaders externally. So all I'm going to do as I move around the school is I'm going to probably go and do 3 visits. And as you said, David, you've got some people where I might say to Jean, who's the early years expert, could you head down to early years? Could you start there, look at early years year 1 and 2 or 3 visits down there? I might say to my other colleague, you're an infant head. Could you please take a look at year 2 for me and year 1? So there's just these light touch, informal, quick snapshot visits taking place that's going to contribute to this wider report. And again, I'll be talking and assuring my staff really that the whole process is about feedback. We're going to gain some real good insights from that, get some data. We're going to get a knockout report that we're going to be able to use strategically, and we're going to be able to share, and we're going to populate it with photos as well. So as I walk off into the school, everybody's headed off in different directions. I'm going to head for, let me go and see Ernest. So I click, I'm key stage 2, I'm going, upper key stage 2. And so as I go in and my colleagues head into the classrooms as well, we're all looking at the same 4 key areas. Now, our learning snapshot is designed very specifically to guide, because we're not together, but we do need guidance. We're not dictating, we're not telling the staff what to do. The other thing that we found, which I always mention, is if we have excessive content in here, it takes longer and I won't be able to get my colleagues out of the class. And we found that when we designed it. So we're looking basically at behavior, teaching, learning and outcomes. And that's why it doesn't matter where they are. We're just focusing on those 4 core areas. It also means I've not got excessive kind of recording to do. And also I can give sufficient advice, support, recommendations, as well as capturing good practice. So I always like to say those things before we start. So we're heading to the classroom. I could see that it's effective. In there, 1 or 2 sentences. Don't need much more. I don't need a paragraph because there's 4 of us today doing this. We don't want to overwhelm staff with feedback. So just 1 or 2 sentences into here to say, what is the teacher doing to engage the children? So rather than dictating it, rather than using teacher standards or Ofsted, and obviously I mentioned at the beginning, you can create your own, you can edit our content too. So yes, if we need to make a recommendation, fine. Let's be open to that. This process is not about appraisal. These people are not your line managers. These people who are contributing to, and again, I always go back to the fact that if I was a year 6 teacher and I've moved to year 2, I'm going to expect some feedback because the skill set is very different in the same way that we've got a range of subjects to teach. So let's acknowledge that. I know this is, you mentioned about this being subject specific. So if I'm teaching, as I go into the classroom and somebody's teaching science, it might be the first time that they've taught science in year 5. So we have to consider that, don't we? We have to know a little bit around the context. We can make a priority statement if we want to do, put that into the next steps, come back and filter that afterwards so we can find it nice and quick. But if it's a next step, it could also be highly effective. Also, if my colleagues like to jot, I do, use a stylus, we can write and record it that way. So then we're looking at basically management and organisation, subject knowledge, modelling, pitch, pace, progression, planning, use of ICT, resources, all of those things. There could be any of those things, but we're just looking, and my colleagues are looking for indicators. What is the teacher doing well? What's the impact of that? How have they prepared the learning in that sense? Pupil contributions. So here, and I'm going to show you in a little bit, really talk a bit more about how we can pause this because that's useful. But we're going to look at this instance, it could be a science lesson. So I'm walking in, like I say, and I'm seeing lots of practical work, lots of chat, lots of talk, maybe whiteboards, recording, documenting, whatever it could be. So I'm getting a good idea of what goes on in there. Interesting from my experience as well, when we did this, my staff came back to me and there were some lessons where they were in and out in 6 or 7 minutes, and they were saying that the teacher had walked over, shaken the hand, introduced themselves, said if there's any questions, talked a little bit about what they were doing, and thanks very much if you need anything. And they felt really assured. And I always think that's a very good way to kind of, when somebody comes into your classroom, that in itself is a good, confident way to present what you're doing. Value, I always mentioned this one because when we tried progress, we couldn't get any of those people out of the classroom. They felt obliged to stay from start to finish. But here with value, we can really look closely at and think about the effectiveness of the learning, how successful it is without being shackled to that progress term. which can be a bit of a pass and fail. It's a very loaded term. So it's same with achievement, attainment, ARA, etc. So value is a good way for us, it just puts them at ease and they feel much more comfortable about offering that feedback. So that's really how simple the process is, which means that we can work nice and efficiently, concise. We can be in and out of the classrooms. We can get 3 areas that are strong, maybe 1 recommendation. We can weight it in that sense. It's not excessive feedback. Lots of positives really around the design. The other thing I would be saying to them is, if you see anything really good, do me a favor and take a picture. And so, as you can see here, it actually doesn't normally do this and take a picture of me. But in the classroom, we're gonna be taking a picture here of English, and also we're going to be tagging this. So this was a science lesson actually. Let's go back to that. Let's look at science. So I'm seeing something good. I'm taking a photograph. Expected standard. Let's say, what else do I like about this? Let's rocks and soils. Let's put in the area of study. We could go into send, pupil premium, and so on. So we're taking photos. We're annotating as well here at the same time, and we're uploading that too. So in here, I can just put a comment saying, what it is that I like about that. I won't take a picture because at the minute it's focused on me, and my camera's in use. So I will head then really. So as far as kind of that process is concerned, David, with everybody being dotted around the school, dropping in, just those 4 areas to sort of focus on, taking photos. Does that sound well suited to the kind of activity that you would want to be able to see?
Yeah, and what I like about that is it's very light touch. I go back to probably the last observation I did was probably linked to recruitment. But before that, in terms of monitoring, the actual checklist of stuff I was looking for was unreal.
Yeah.
All linked to teacher standards. And you felt obliged to find as many as possible. In that case.
Which takes longer. I mean, that's the thing. You're going to be in the classroom longer. There's more heat. You can do it less often. It becomes more formal.
Yeah. So, yeah, I like that a lot.
And I can just to mention as well, David, just to finish off that, I can go back and edit it. So if I'm just getting a few quick jottings and I want to come back and rework it or add a bit more, and I have 10 minutes back in the office just to tidy your thoughts, which is often quite common, we can do that as well. We can also pause the observation. I'll take a little look at that in a moment. And obviously, once I've done that one that's complete, Ernest, I'll go see a couple more people. And this is where it doesn't have to, I don't have to see all of these people out of this list, which is the whole staff. I might just pop and say, oh, right, who's in here? Oh, James, I'll go see James. And so I can click and then go see, like I say, out of that selection there, 3 or 4 different people. Because when the report is then done, we just click a button to say, we're back in the office. Everybody's done 3 or 4 visits. Click the button and it's complete and we'll get the report from there. We've got enough. We don't need everybody seeing everybody.
Very good. Excellent. Well, what I'll do now, I'm going to focus in a little bit, David, now, and present a slightly different situation to you where I wanted to look more closely in one subject. I'm going to choose writing.
Yeah.
And I'm also going to, we're talking distributive leadership. So I'm going to go into my writing lead is going to use one of their connections at as another school. So they know their writing lead from another school.
Yeah.
And they want their writing lead to come in and look at specific standards in writing.
Yeah.
You could overlap moderation here, possibly, because it is so subjective.
Yeah.
But how could let's say two leaders work together in terms of validating outcomes?
Yeah. Okay. So are we looking at, did you say key stage 2 or upper key stage 2? Have we got, what's the focus there, David?
Let's go upper key stage 2.
Okay. So I'm gonna label it again quite clearly. We're gonna look at English books. And are we going, are we moderating sort of all, but what's the sample? Because one thing that I find is if we do top, middle, bottom, That's okay for a bit of validation. It's okay. We'll gain something from it. It takes longer. It's less insightful, and the reports are, a little bit more sort of ambiguous. Did you say, was there a specific? Are we looking at expected or above expected or send? What would you like to look at just for this example?
I'd like to look at expected plus.
Okay, right. So we're looking there really at a couple of books here specifically. It's quite a. So I'm assuming that this is, first of all, within your school leadership plan. And I also, quite common really in this instance, when you may have had, let's say you had last year's writing results that didn't go too well. So what you wanted to do was focus on it in your school improvement plan, and then have that external validation and that verification with somebody else coming in externally to help you with that process moving forward. Not only to make it more robust and credible, but also to add and support and contribute to your internal processes. So there's a few things there. So I'm going to make this, I'm choosing a book study, I'm going to make it English, and I'm also going to add writing in here.
So what could be happening there, David, as well, whilst you're just doing that?
Okay.
Is that let's not forget that this process we're doing here at my school could be reversed or mirrored at the other school, so that my writing lead is going to get a really good view of what they're doing at the other school as well, which will be valuable.
So you could see we're going to then add our observers. So this is going to be, let's say, it's going to be me for a start, because I'm the English lead in my school. And then I'm going to pick an English lead from the school down the road. So for this person, let's say it's Edith. So now we talked about this being an upper key stage 2, so 2 form entry. So let's say we've got 4 teachers here. So let me pick Charles, the good Colonel, Gloria, and Kirk. I'd ask each of those books, those staff now, to give me a couple of books expected plus. So that's where you would specify the books that you want. Now, it's interesting because I'm interested to see what they give me, I suppose, what their standards look like. I'm looking to see what the progression looks like between 5 and 6 and across the cohort. So lots of gains to be made, not only with one person doing this, but 2. So I've obviously assigned this to both of us. I've already, let's not forget, added my colleague Edith to the system as an external leader. So they're going to come in and we'll log into the system, which they will be able to do. And when they log in, by the way, all they will be able to do is perform the activity. So they'll just have the walks button, and then they'll have the workflow, which is for feedback purposes. So here, as we move then across to the walks, just the same principle, really, but obviously you got 2 laptops, and for each of those teachers, they've all given me 2 or 3 expected plus books. And so as we click into here, we can then start to use this, really. And again, it's guiding us, it's telling my colleague what we want to focus on. And in this case, we're looking at the presentation, we're looking at the content, age-appropriate programs of study. So again, pitch, pace, coverage, we're focusing in on those areas. We're looking at the pupil contribution, so sustained application, acquisition and application of skills, which is a really good thing to be able to look at. Progress on the day towards the objective, Monday to Friday, first page to last. Challenge and extension, so we've got breadth, marking and feedback. So each of these teachers is going to get one kind of set of feedback and recommendations, but let's go back to the point that we're here for validating, but we're also providing channels for recognition. So these 6 areas, yes, there may hopefully be recommendations, but also there's going to be lots and lots of acknowledgement of good work taking place here as well. And obviously we're taking photos at the same time. So I'm asking my colleague, when they see something good, let's take a shot. And that's going to go into the gallery, and then we're going to use that gallery. So just by doing that, 2 people, we're going to create one report that has combined analysis, strengths and areas for improvement in these 6 areas. Then we're going to create professional dialogue for the same day to share with our colleagues, so there's no delay. We're going to populate the gallery with the expected plus to show people what good practice looks like and what the standards are like in 5 and 6. and then we're going to take all of that away in a report and use all of that. So we'll come to the impact shortly, but that's how the process looks. So again, David, does that make sense in relation to kind of guiding both people? Because you've got somebody external, so we're going to have some kind of guidance. We can't sit with a blank piece of paper, I don't think, really.
Oh, well, I've, my teaching experience has pretty much been upper key stage 2. And the amount of, well, what we would loosely call moderation meetings, where it was a bit of a free-for-all, to be honest, and without much guidance. That's really good. And because it's what we want is consistency, because if this is going to be an event mirrored at the other school, then we want that consistency, so we know whereabouts we are compared to where they are in their judgments, because we want to be the same, ideally.
That's a really interesting point when we look at sort of consistency of reporting. So when we've worked, I'll give you a good example. We work with this, lots of MATs, lots of academies, lots of groups, federations, whatever it may be, whatever organisation. But one good example was a director of learning of an academy in a MAT down in Swindon. And when they signed up to Nautilus, what they did was sort of did a session with us really to look at creating content similar to ours, listened to all the theory, looked at the frameworks that they had in school, created it on one system, imported it into 4 schools, and then each school had a consistent way of reporting. They had autonomy. They were able to go back to that director of learning and be able to talk about standards. He was able to compare between the schools across them. He was able to see that they were focusing on the same key things. But this is the key point, I would say. That process was not about telling teachers what to do. That process was about capturing, evaluating, seeing, and responding to what's happening in the classrooms, albeit with that wider team of expertise, rather than standardizing and monitoring and dictating, which I don't doubt that there's a place for, when you want to get consistency, but beyond that, it may not help sort of to develop skill sets.
Great. Well, I've got one kind of minor, a smaller area to cover now. I'm thinking of, in my head, there are, for me, I think in my experience, I've found 2 groups within schools that naturally have networked very well in the past.
Okay.
From my experience anyway, and that's early years. They seem to have a really good solid networks, where that's just a shared identity, but also SEND, S-E-N-D, because that's just such a huge role. So a bit of an open one here. But what could this look like in terms of supporting the development of early years? Now, I'll leave that completely open up to you, really.
Yeah, I'll show you our framework. I mean, what I won't do is go through that whole process of setting it up. But let's say, just once again, that we are from those networks. My early years lead is also adding 2-3 early years leads who she works with. They trust, they like each other, they get along, all those good things that happen at the same time as creating partnerships. And how can we then utilize that lovely group? And I'd say, as you were saying, that there's those relationships quite often in SEND as well, because of the nature of the work that they do. So let's invite in that early years lead, or one of them from school down the road, and let's do a self-evaluation for our big self-evaluation on early years. Let's take a little look and use a framework to do that. So this might happen over a day or a morning. It's more practical. So the 2 of us together will set this up, and then we'll both head down to early years. Now, this is useful, I think, particularly, again, like I said before, if you're unsure about early years and the standards in early years, if you want to kind of look and evaluate so you can identify some strengths and areas for improvement, if you want to improve standards and look at specifics, if your GLD wasn't great, there's lots of good reasons why you might want to do this, and it would be on plans across the country, really, and that's why we've created this performer. So again, what we're doing when we invite our colleague in, They log in on their iPad, which I've got ready for them. I've got my tech guy all set and sorted. They will head down to early years. They've got their performer to complete. I've got mine to do. And again, we're guiding. So we've got consistency. So we're looking at the same thing. So we've got lines of inquiry and prompts. Now, this one's a bit more thorough because in actual fact, what we know about early years is it's much more complex. So what we tend to do in early years, or have done before now, because it's so vast, is we've tended to say to the early years teachers, we'll come and do an observation and it'll be an hour, just because it's the same as everybody else. And it's an afterthought, and I did it, so, but then you go down, you realize, well, what am I going to see in an hour? I could see some teaching, but I'm not going to see the continuous provision. And because of the level of complexity and the breadth of provision, we're just missing out on an opportunity, first of all, to be accurate, and secondly, to give them some feedback, which really does justice to the hard work. So here we're going to look at the relationship. So we can take a little look at that one. We can look at the planning. Now, what you're going to be saying to me now, yeah, it's pretty big. So let's say we start by looking at the continuous provision. So I walk into the classroom and we can see the continuous provisions in flow. So here we're looking a little bit at how relevant it is, the pitch of it, the engagement. We're looking at which children do what. And we're really looking at how that connects as well to some of the direct teaching that's been taking place in the setting. So there's quite a lot of sort of different aspects without dictating what things should look for. We're looking at these we've got a few helpful prompts so it can guide us both. So when we look at the continuous provision, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, we're taking a few look. We might step outside then, and then we can pause the observation. So we might pause it then, and we might have a conversation, a discussion around it, and populate that a little bit, but also agree what we're seeing. And that might mean that then we come back shortly and we see the direct teaching. So as we then come back and have a chat, we might be doing this. Now, bearing in mind, if I'm the early years leader and I've invited in a colleague, I'm sort of directing and dictating and managing things. Could be a two-form entry like it was in my school setting or not. And we're just going to pick up and sort of look at the timings. And obviously, I know what they look like, and I'm showing a colleague. So we're then looking at the teaching. We're looking at the observations, the use of data, looking at that backstory and how that's captured systematically, how we use that. The adults we talk about teams in early years. So rather than look at what, not just at what they do, but how they're managed, how the leaders incorporate them, what their skill set is, and how their professional development sort of impacts on the setting. The progressing within the Daling setting, but it's from individual starting points. So we're not saying GLD. We can't be too specific because we can't make it a pass or fail. So you can see it is a more thorough because there's more to look at there, which is why we may do it over a morning. And we wouldn't necessarily be in there for the whole morning. This is where we can come in, we can come out, we can call back. These kind of things, relationships, I would be looking at, no doubt, at the same time, simultaneously. We'd be looking at and triangulating, looking at how the planning informs the teaching, then looking at the assessment, how it informs the planning. You get the idea, really. So I think that with that pause button, it's a very flexible way of working. The other thing that I would say, really, again, is taking those pictures. So 2 people in that setting for that morning will capture some really, really fantastic examples of practice in my provision that's going to go into the gallery, and then we're going to be able to use it from there. How's that, David?
That's great. Yeah, I think that. Yep, I like that in terms of like I said before, the consistency of going in and being able to quickly go in and make some very quick observations and capturing. That's great.
I really wouldn't go any more than 7. I mean, I think when you look at these areas, they're all significant. So it's hard to kind of to make them more concise. You could have a go, but I wouldn't really sort of say more than 7, because what we're doing here is we're sort of evaluating the provision in early years. Yes, we might be looking at teachers so we can give individual feedback, but there's lots of things sort of taking place when we go into that setting.
Great. Well, I've got 2 words for you now.
Yes.
And these were 2 words spoken to me a while ago when I first became a head teacher. When my first advisor came in and said, the 2 words I'm going to always ask you: so what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You always hear that, don't you? In terms of, okay, so we've done these learning walks, we've done these book studies, we've had people coming in, we've reciprocated that, we've got this information. What can we do with it now? What?
Yeah, and that is really the key thing. I would completely agree. I remember having the same. We might have had the same school improvement partner. I don't know, but the guy that I had, I remember when I was a new head or an acting head teacher, he came in and we had that conversation. And yeah, it never leaves you, does it really? But ultimately, I think there's a few things to consider. So we're moving across to the blue area here. So we've done these things. What is it that we take away? What can we use? How are we going to add value, impact? What processes can we use then really to drive improvement, to give that external validation, and so on in school? So the first rule is that it has to be quick. So if there's a delay, then, and I know we've talked about this before, David, really, that idea of your SIP coming round, doing a learning walk, and then stepping into the staff room the next day and says, he says, everything's really good, thanks everyone for your efforts, and he was really pleased. And it's sort of, that's the extent of the feedback, quite possibly, just because work gets in the way, and also we've ushered him out of the door, and thankfully there's been nothing to pick up on. So it's kind of, well, how do we really take this expertise and drive, use it specifically to kind of focus on school improvement? So I'm on the dashboard now. We've got here a whole load of data and insights. I could see everything that's taking place across my school. Again, if I was SENCO, my dashboard would be SEND specific. If I was early years, it would just be early years. So whilst we're doing all of those learning works, whenever we tag anything, whenever we specify the subject or aspect, what we're doing is we're taking that data and we're steering it into different places. So if I give you an example here, I could see all of my learning walks, my book studies, all the activities, as well as the surveys, because let's not forget we can do parent and pupil surveys. But the minute I add a filter onto here, such as English or send, I'm not sure how much is in my send, but let's try it. So if I save that, then you can see in here, we've got the send evaluation feedback. We've got some activities that have taken place. So my SENCO can basically build this portfolio here and get more and more insights from here. And we'll click in and take a little look at a report in a moment that I'm going to share. So I'll come back out here, but if you can imagine that send, we can do the same with English, maths, all of those things. So everybody's contributions, all of the leaders, it's all going into that place. So if we'd have done, for example, that moderation, that's going into the English lead, so into their dashboard, so we can filter by English, which is what I can do. So we were looking really at a whole school activity there. So if I key in now, this is where it's just really good to be able to find things sort of quite quickly. And here I can see all my whole school activities. Here I can see whole school learning walk 1. We can see there's been 14 contributions, and we can see that the average score, or the score for this activity is 3.29. It's taking all of those 14 entries, and within that, each of the 4 kind of lines of inquiry, it's going to be one number, just so I could see nice and quickly. Now I can see that my average here in my school is 3.07. So 1 is low, 4 is high. And that's just so we can see this quickly and identify as leaders what we need to see. Is it good? Is it better? Is it worse? Anything we need to act on? This looks really good. So I'm going to go in there and take a closer look. And then what this is going to give me really is, I can take this away in a PDF, and I'm going to show you how we do that. But here we can see basically the contributions from everyone down here. So each individual contribution from the internal and external leaders. I can also see, again, a ballpark figure for each visit. So I can see where the strengths are. That means I can click into it and look closer. And what we're doing there with everything that's coming into the system, that volume of information, is we're then starting to identify what we need to do next. So we're going to give feedback to them, but rather than blanket this, we're going to direct feedback to where needs must and work more intuitively. So that's what I would always suggest, because as we then start to click into here and say, take a little look at this observation, we can then click in. We can have a little look, and it will just tell us really what their views were really whilst they were doing that activity. So here you can see the 4 areas. Here we can see the feedback. We can see what, and these stars really are just there for me to be able to see what do we need to do next? How does this look? And I think that's really important again. So we're using all the insight. The ones, by the way, that are highlighted here, orange, they're external. So you can see we've got a lot of external contributions here. But obviously when they disappear, I can still use each of that feedback for the staff. So we've got some really good stuff to use, and lots of it. You know, it's up to you as to how you want to make that impact. Down here, the lines of inquiry. So, and that's what this is showing us as well. So this really shows me each line of inquiry and the averages for each one over time, forever. This one shows me this example against that one. So here we can see that's the average. That's what's typical across school. This one's been slightly better, so something really good there. I could share that with my staff and say thanks very much. You know, 4 head teachers have kind of seen this. This is their thoughts and views, and they've all been into multiple lessons across the school. So it's been really well managed. Here you can see something really strong. So we might be looking closer at these lines of inquiry, finding out more about where the strengths are, and looking to be able to utilise that across school. And we could take that away as a report. The report looks like this. And you asked me the question really about so what. I think the report is, in essence, the so what. So when I had that example of working with those head teachers, here we've got 14 entries by 4 different head teachers really on this learning walk. So some have done 3, some have done 4. Depends how long they've been in the classroom, not a problem. And here you can see the headlines. Now, when I share this with my colleagues, first of all, the top half is going to be quality of education. The bottom half is going to be a little bit like we looked at before for pupil for dialogue and feedback. And so we can use this report. Now, if I shared this with my inspectors, governors, exec head, I don't know, learning partners, whatever they may be, they don't need me to interpret. They can see it nice and quickly. It's self-explanatory. And as we start to come through, it's got those 4 lines of inquiry. And you can see it's got some real good validation. There's no mention in the top half to teachers or lessons, quality of education. But it's the beauty of it is here, 14 evaluations. So you've got all of these contributors here. We've got 2 there. You know, we can see how thorough this has been, which is fine to do it on your own. I could go to 4 teachers, but it would say 4. And as soon as we work with those people in the same way, the reports, by the way, would look exactly the same if it was the book study. So we would obviously have what was it? You know, 2 people looking at 4 teachers, so it would be 8. Or I think actually it would be 12 because we've got 6 in the book study, 6 areas, lines of inquiry. You get the idea. Once we share it, we've got something really good to take away, to use, to share with the staff, to identify strengths and areas for improvement, and then, as I mentioned, to be able to create professional dialogue. So I can then use these just to be able to have a chat the next day. The stars help me to know where to start, who I need to spend time with, how long I need to spend with them, and to work intuitively across school. So that's how you can use them. If I wanted to forward it on to them, I could do, I guess. We're also developing now that you can switch the stars off. And there's another way that we can feedback if we want to do. We can also go back to the platform and take a look at the workflow, which just plucks out all of the insights coming in. So I can see here, as I come down, I always pick a name where you can't read it. Let me pick somebody where you can read it. Oh, no, actually, we'll use that person there. So we've got Miss Dufresnoy, you know, observing chat. I can see what the feedback is here, and so I can use that. And more importantly, it's got my feedback here. So I'm Jules Verne, observing James. I can sit with my laptop. I can give them dialogue, support, feedback the same day. There's no delay, there's no reporting to do. And from that process of 4 people coming in, everybody is going to get feedback. And whether or not it's professional dialogue, shoulder to shoulder, because again, English leads, working with English leads, and then talking, you know, feeding back to all of the team in Key Stage 2. In the same way with the early years, it just means you could put your laptop there and have the chat the same day. So it's nice and informal, and I love that idea about it. We can add an action or a comment, and if we've identified any next steps, we can bring those up and we can tackle those individually as well. At the same time, We're populating the database, so all our leaders are contributing to this. So my headlines here, I can see, and this is for a priority user, head teacher, I could see my standards across the school. And then, you know, it gives me, again, those external partners are contributing to this picture. So that idea of halo effect, it's more likely to be accurate. You know, that idea that internally you see things differently. They do call it the halo effect. It means we can say to people, we've got external leaders working with us to evaluate our teaching and learning, which is what this is. And we can use this. And obviously, once we start to filter again by subjects, early years, all of those things, we can start to get more insight. We can learn more about, you know, what standards look like, see who needs what, everybody's contribution. So that helps me to be really knowledgeable about standards in my school as a head teacher. And the same with the trends. You know, this is the big data set. If I just make one quick point, if I look at the book studies here, this is always an interesting one, because whenever I look at the book study trends, I could do book study maths, book study English, or whatever. What we currently do in school is that we do one, and then it's dead, it's dormant, it disappears, it sits on the server. But here we've actually got a long-term record. We've got a big picture data set that's been, you know, contextual data set, and we've got trends. So we could see flight paths, we could see improvements. And if I was looking at English for my school improvement plan, this would be critical in telling me how do things look, particularly as I use those tags that we added, you know, for upper key stage 2 or those kind of things. So you can use this and get some really good insights. We can also use it to support CPD, and it's not a checklist of teacher standards. So as far as kind of that's concerned, that's all great. That's all happening simultaneously. That's the beauty of it. And in a 1-hour exercise, we're creating reports that give us all of those things. Then we're starting to think about the gallery, which is obviously demonstrating standards. So you talked in the gallery. So here's the gallery, my gallery. This is showing the expectations across school for all subjects. All leaders are contributing to it. Those heads are taking pictures. My early years people who are down in early years are taking photos, and we're populating and building up this showcase sort of database of standards in our school. Not only is it that, it's, you know, it is once again capturing best practice in your curriculum. So as you start to key in here and look at writing, for example, and you mentioned that book study, we've got those snapshots taking place. So down here, we've probably got something like what we were, talking about, such as here, the more thorough upper key stage expected plus, or whatever they may be. And you talked about sort of venturing into moderation. Yes, we've been a little bit more thorough with this. So we've got some of the curriculum statements to show what the work demonstrates. And that's so that the gallery is communal, so anybody can go into it, anybody can see this. But more importantly, when they do, they will be able to see what the best practice and standards look like right across the school. And that puts you in a fantastic position just by using the camera at the same time as being in the classrooms. And that's why we're centralizing all this stuff, David. We're putting everything into one place, so you've got it at your fingertips, because my experience is we need to give each other, we need to, as leaders, have clarity, because that gives us confidence to make decisions, to see things, to make recommendations, to give feedback and tell people, you know, that's really great, and to be sincere and accurate with it. You know, I love the way you do that, or I'd like to suggest this, and create a culture where we've got all of those things occurring. And I think the gallery is just a really good way to be able to demonstrate that.
It is, and I love the fact it's tagged.
So what is that? That was a lot of so what's, David.
Yeah, well, I like the fact it's tag driven, so you can be fairly flexible in terms of what you are capturing and evidencing as you go through your school year and your curriculum and your outcomes. I can see all a load of different things I could be using that for. Yeah, one question I've got, David, is when you mentioned, this was going right to the beginning, about setting up your laptops or your iPads for people coming in.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
Was that a long job?
Okay, sorry. Yeah, nice one for picking that one out, because I was I'd moved on from there. So yeah, I no, well, this is the thing. Whenever like my head teacher group, brilliant people, but if I'd have said to them, you all need to bring an iPad, you all need to follow the link that I'll send to you, you need to log in, all those, oh, no chance. I can think of some of those people where there's no way that they would do that. And so as a host, let's just flip that a little bit. So I've got these head teachers coming into school. What I'm going to do on over here, I'm going to click across to the Act As tab. So I'm going to get four. We mentioned 4 head teachers, so I'm going to get 4 iPads or tablets. So I'm going to ask my tech person to do this. I'm going to log into them all as me. So log into them all as Jules Verne, each one, and then on this one, I'm going to let's say, who was it? Let me come back to some of these head teachers that I've got. Jean was a head teacher. I would click that button there. Oh no, yes, that's right, yeah. And it would switch the device across to them.
Yes.
So it just means, so then I would go to the next one and I would click on Phileas Fogg and it would switch that device across to Phileas.
Okay.
So that means, yeah, so I mean, like when I work for the local authority and do learning walks using Nautilus, I don't take anything. I show up at the school, 2 iPads there that the head teacher's logged in on. On one of them, they click it, they switch the assume identity on to me, and then we head off into the corridors. I can't switch back as well. So once, you'd have to log out and log back in. But it just means that it takes seconds to prepare that. And the logistics are a big key thing when you're working with those partners to get the best again out of your time. If it's your diocese advisor, your LA person, all of those things, they've got to be really considered.
Yeah, fantastic. That's good. Another question as well, because what I know is that in a lot of multi-academy trusts, teaching school alliances and things like that, schools may already have some content that they may well have started training staff on, they may want to incorporate and put into the system. Is that something that's possible?
Yeah, and the lovely thing about this is, we acknowledge that people have their own ideas. This is not a piece of software where you click a button and it just populates things. I think that to some extent that covers you, and we create a suite of frameworks. So whilst we were looking at those learning snapshots and things like that, there's actually 10 frameworks and 2 surveys on there. So you can create parent surveys, pupil surveys, send those links out and get those the same day and again in the same place. So you can see how what we've done with our suite is we've focused those principles and we've aligned them with some very key sort of lines of inquiry, and we think that works really well. That's our preferred approach, really, if we want to work and utilize the expertise that's coming into the school. But having said that, we know that people have got ideas. We want people to be creative. We're not daft enough to think otherwise. So the whole idea is that we built in the Builder, which is an editing suite, so you could create your own content. So if you want to take our content and then play around with it, you can. So, and then whenever you create anything new, it will create a new data set on your dashboard. So again, we can create some really bespoke content. And we always recommend sort of working quite methodically here, because what you're going to do is create a framework and then you're going to apply it to different subjects. And again, that's the benefit. So as you were saying, in different organizations and schools, they will already have some of those things. I spoke to a school yesterday where they have a very specific one for learning walks, but not for book studies. So for the learning walk, they would add theirs to the platform, and you can just click new survey, create a standard learning walk there, or a standard book study, whatever you want, any activity, drop-ins, observations, learning walks, book studies, those kind of things. And it's very easy to do that. You just add a question at a time, a line of inquiry, and then your prompts. And it can be as thorough, as little or as less as you like. But once you've created it, you can then import and export it. So if I was going to show you here a SEND book study, so this is a book study that we created specifically for SEND children or children with additional needs. As you go into here, you'll see it differs, because whilst we're looking at some, we've got content, just how it's been adjusted and personalized, pupil contributions, and it's about securing progress in books. And then you'll get from, again, it's a very different one to the other book study that we've got. And as you add those, for 5 areas. So this is one that's been created by a Senko in a school. Do we want to share this one? So if you said to me, we really like that, I could share it with you, you can import it. So this is where centrally, or, we may have one, schools sharing content locally, nationally, internationally, really from a Nautilus point of view. But the example there, that the director of learning, they had a blueprint, they created the content, they put it into the 4 schools, and then away you go. They had a very consistent way to be able to do it. Dead easy, dead simple, sharing best practice, and again, tapping into each other's expertise. So as we start to kind of develop and create Nautilus to do these things, I think the dividends really start to kind of appear one by one, hopefully, because I know what it's like to manage all of these things. So as we get to the end now, David, I'm conscious of time. We've got lots of things that we've looked at there. Do you think really that sort of covered the key things you wanted to look at today?
It does, yeah. And in terms of supporting collaboration, it's a lovely word, collaboration, but there's quite a lot to it, and without some guidance and support, we could end up going down a blind alleyway, really. So I like the way that this can support that process of working together with different schools and getting something positive out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people coming in, whether it's I think there were good examples today, a couple of early years leaders, couple of writing leads, 4 head teachers. It's a process. It's about doing these things across the year. Your school improvement plan is written. What are you going to do if it's, if it says maths? Are you going to wait until the test scores come out, analyze the data, and then go back and look at the teaching? Why don't we focus on the teaching and learning? If we can have experts coming in that we already have that network contributing to that process in school, we can really drive some very specific areas with that focused kind of activity. As you were looking at there, upper key stage 2 expected plus, if that's what we need to look at, then let's do that stuff. Let's get that insight. Let's find out what we do well. Let's find out what we need to do together. And then we need to break that down as well and give individual feedback all at the same time, capture and demonstrate standards and articulate those in the gallery. So just as we finish now, really just to kind of mop things up nicely, we've got tech support on the platform for schools, so we can help with those things. User guide in there so your leaders can come in, and there's some videos in there as well, so you can see those. Video tutorials, we're going to put this one that we've done today onto YouTube, so onto our channel, so people can access that. And then finally, I'm just going to come back to this one. So whilst the inspectorate that we're using here is Ofsted, this might differ whether or not it's an ISI school or international, doesn't really matter where. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to revert that back. I'm going to save it. I'm going to go back to my dashboard, and I'm going to download some reports now, the same reports, but they're going to apply the Ofsted speak. So internally, I've got this very different sort of approach, a very different look and feel, where we're intentionally reducing the stakes in the interests of accuracy. As far as your outwards facing meetings are concerned, you need these terms to appear consistent, to be able to talk to inspectors, to be credible, and there's certainly times when that's useful. So you could toggle the challenge and support in school as you would want. So those are just added features really to finish off with. And as we go over to the website, I'll come across this just as we finish. All of this is, you can learn more about us here over at nautilus.education. If you wanted to sort of take a little look at how the platform works, we've got a nice little introduction. The community is a great place because we've been talking today about collaborating. So when we've got examples of schools, let's say 6 that use Nautilus, they may be in a map, but they may not. There might be a pyramid or a local authority group. We work with all of those groups. Then ultimately what we're doing is we're able to kind of create content, share, work together. We could also access training and feedback and webinars and things like that. So Senkos can pop along to the webinar we've got here, the Send. And super subject leadership is an interesting one because all schools are looking to develop that at the minute, but it's how you do it and the solutions that you provide that don't create additional work, particularly for, when subject leaders are class-based. Connecting leaders we looked at today, And things like the newsletter and the Facebook group can all help people again to connect. Not just, we talked about the networks locally and tapping into those, but also nationally in the Facebook group there, internationally, sharing content and downloading some of the free content we have as well. As we click down on the login here, there's the trials, there's all of the information as well. One thing I would say really for anybody looking at this, we're really happy and we really like to show people around. So we would always encourage booking a demo in, which you can click, book it in, and myself or David will be able to present the platform, show you lots of really good solutions for all leaders. And then obviously these things you can access in addition. But that's a good starting point really for us to be able to show you how it all works. So don't be afraid to click the button, get in touch, book a demo. We'd love to talk more and show you around and show your team how the platform works.